Welcome back, everyone, to the Listen Carefully podcast. I'm so excited to have our guest today. Her name is Lenora Edwards, and she is here to share with us all about speech and how that relates to listening. And yeah, I would love for you to introduce yourself. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. It's great to be here. So my name is Lenora Edwards, and I am a board-certified speech and language pathologist and the chief knowledge officer with a speech therapy company known as BetterSpeech. And we are an online speech therapy company providing speech therapy services to people of all ages.
Wonderful. Yeah. How can speech affect development? I'm so curious. I know listeners are probably curious as well. I know we have a lot of expectations in our society about development in general and how there are different developmental milestones and how, parents a lot of the time want to make sure that their children are on track. And so, yeah, I would love to hear your take. I know you probably see a whole range of kids and can see all the differences in different stages. And I would love to hear how development plays a role in the work that you do.
That's a great question. I absolutely love that. So with little ones, and I often say this to people when I hear that they're pregnant, I'm like, great, keep talking, because language development is so important. It's a foundational tool in our development as we move through this world. So when little ones are actually in the womb, they are able to hear information, which is a great thing. They hear tones of voices and they also hear the world around them. As they come into the world, what they're also exploring is the entire world. So we have the ability to understand language, which means we're born with the neuro wiring to understand language. But for our ability to actually understand it, we need to have input of it. And when little ones come into the world, they know nothing about their environment. And it's up to us as the caregivers and as the teachers and the providers of that little one to explain this entire world to them. So as your little one is growing, they're listening in the environment around them and they're actually able to hear sounds. As they grow, they'll start to look for the sounds that they hear. Then they'll start to turn their head for the sounds that they hear. They'll understand the familiar voices that are around them, and they can actually detect when that person that they are very close with, that's frequently in their environment, they can detect changes in their voice. And when they leave the room, they know that they've left the room. So it's a really, really impressive thing when it comes to understanding language. As they grow into 1 and 2 years old, before they even really start to produce the golden words that everybody wants to hear, they're able to understand language and they're already communicating. So newborns, 0 to 3 months, they're actually communicating through their coos and their cries and their smiles. When they start to get to 6 months, what you'll notice is that they'll have more vocal play, which means that they'll babble and they'll coo with or without people, especially with familiar listeners. That's all active communication and engagement, and it continues to build as they grow.
Yeah, just like listening. It's like our ears come in handy for listening. We have 2 of them, right? And then it's like our mouth comes in handy for communication. We have 1 of them, but it's not limited to just our ears and just our mouth. Like that communication happens through eye contact and through body language. And sometimes even beyond the cooing, I know a few kids that will sing, that is their communication. They'll sing and they'll have specific tones that they communicate with and connect with. And yeah, it's
Completely.
so
You said that so beautifully. Absolutely. When we're talking with little ones, especially face to face, it's so important that we're face to face, because as we're communicating, we're showing them gestures. We're showing them the shape of our mouth. They're getting all this information. And I love encouraging people to sing with their little ones and to read stories, but also to keep talking about the things that you're doing in your environment. For example, when you pick them up out of the crib, explaining that you're going to pick them up and what you're going to do next. Some people like to call it narrating. Some people like to call it sportscasting. But really what you're doing is you're explaining this entire world to them. And it's such an important thing to do because they have no ability to understand the language in the sense of they didn't know the information coming in. It's our responsibility to tell them the information, to share with them that language.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's so valuable to have that repetition and that consistency and that patience and knowing that they're learning for the first time and that they're coming up with their own like connections and they're coming up
Mhm.
with, different clever ways of taking in all of the input. And it's interesting because it's like, when we go through development and we become in our adolescence, and then when we become into like our adulthood, like our brain just becomes more hardwired. And so everything becomes more like under this illusion of certainty. Whereas like with kids, because they're processing all of this input that they're receiving, and perhaps the majority of it is new, it's like they want to play things out. They want to process things openly and honestly. And so sometimes it really pushes parents to their edge to like their own capacity of like, wait, do I have the space to support this or hold this or go there with my kid? Like, do I have that patience or am I taking care of myself enough to be in a place where I can, lean into those areas? Because
It's so important.
it is so important. And something else that comes to mind, I'd love to hear your take on, and I know this also has to do with development. Like sometimes in moments of emotional disruption or in moments of like high conflict or tantrums or meltdowns or just, when we're at our emotional edge, it's like a lot of the time parents have just been conditioned to say like, use your words. But usually they request that in a time where like words aren't available. And so I feel like this is another layer of how communication can go beyond words, right? Like behavior can also be communication
Oh
and
yeah.
just expectations that we have for our kids as well, and how that plays into, yeah, who they
That
are.
was that was so beautifully said, especially when you said the emotional edge. Because what people sometimes forget is that little ones also want to be their own person and they also want to be in charge and they
Mm,
also want to have control over their environment, especially because we're frequently telling them what to do, where to go,
mhm,
how to behave, what's expected of them. They're learning, but also understandably so, they want to express what they're feeling also. I like to call
mhm,
it a pause and pivot, especially in those moments where there is a lot of pushback from your little one. And I love to reframe the twos that some people call them a
mhm,
not so great time. I like to really call them like a terrific two because they're really just exploring. They're doing the best that they can. And when you recognize that they're doing the best that they can and you're doing the best that you can, even if everybody's losing their mind at the moment and you feel like you want to pull your hair out, pause.
mhm,
Pause, take a breath, and really allow yourself to shift out of that moment of tension. And if you need to step away, and if you have the ability to step away, great. Even if you're in the same room, just distance yourself and allow the oxygen to start moving through your brain again, because it's really
mhm,
important that we are aware of the emotions that we're having, but also recognize we have full control over them. And we have the ability, even though it sometimes might feel like it, we do have the ability to say, okay, I'm not going to scream right now, and just, and quite literally step away, give yourself that time out, because what's happening is you're pushing on a door that says pull and it's not going to budge. They need a moment, you need a moment. When you pause, you can then pivot into a better direction. And in those moments where those emotions are high, I encourage people to watch the tone of their voice. So you change your posture, you change your breathing,
mhm,
really get that movement, but also change the tone of your voice because you could be coming up here screaming. And as you do, those emotions heighten and those cortisol levels and those hormones really start to flood the system. When you can gain control over it, you can bring yourself back down. So I encourage people to soften their voice, and you can still be firm and you can still say, I said no. And it doesn't have to be the sugar coated thing, But what you're doing in that moment is you're gaining control over the situation. Little ones, their emotions are all over the place because they're little. They don't know how to consistently manage that energy. And it's up to us to be able to help guide them through. And when you pause and pivot, recognize your own emotions, you're gaining control of your system, and neurologically and energetically, their system will start to wire with yours. And that's a good thing. You get the power back, you get the control back, and you also get that moment to say, okay, this could be a screaming match and this could turn into a really bad situation, but I'd rather not go there right now. And quite literally, just allow yourself those minutes to pause, recalibrate, and pivot and do something else.
I love that reframe, the pause and pivot, because it's like, do we really need to hold on to being right? It's like, and right meaning like what's familiar, that was how we were treated, or if that's
Mm-hmm.
integrated into us, it's like, wait a minute, we do have that choice point to make a different
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
direction. So yeah, that's so powerful. Well, I remember the day that that you reached out and you had sent that video over, and it came in perfect timing because I had a client that week where like she was like according to class, like she was struggling with her sight words, but what was really going on was she just needed a little bit more like time and attention and intention with just being able to focus and just having like that one-on-one time with her parent outside of the class, because um it can feel like a lot of pressure if
Oh, yeah.
parents receive feedback that like their kids aren't performing at that
Mm-hmm.
expectation. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that came in handy. It was like literally the perfect timing because
That's awesome.
you
I'm so
know
glad. Parents, especially in today's parents, I feel like today's parents are different than the parents that I had grown up with, and they're experiencing parenting, but in a almost heightened level of judgment kind of experience, where and with BetterSpeech, especially because I work remotely. So the fact that I get to work remotely is great. We're online and I get to work with so many different families in so many different areas. And they'll come to me and that we're starting to talk about, the experiences that their children are having. And in those first few minutes, you can really tell that this is a very emotional, very heightened emotional state for them. And what I always share with them is that they did nothing wrong, because they feel like there's so much judgment that comes with their child having difficulties. Not only are they worried about their child, now they're worried about what people think of their child. Now they're worried about what people think of them as a parent. Now they're judging themselves. And now it's so intense and so emotional. It's such an emotionally intense experience that I really encourage them to pause and just recognize, A, they did nothing wrong. B, they've always been doing the best that they can with the tools, knowledge, and energy available to them. And that this is simply where we are, and this is where we're going to go. That it's not about judgment. It's not about saying you did anything wrong. Nope, none of that. And really creating that nurturing plan and that really supportive coaching plan for the parent to the clinician, and then also for the clinician with the child. Because when they come together, it is so much stronger, especially in where I live. So I live in the state of Pennsylvania, and if you go to an outpatient clinic or if you go to the school setting, there's a mask involved, there's a shield involved, but also parent, guardian, other caregiver isn't able to be a part of that therapy session. Because with Better Speech, we're online, we are there in the comfort of your own home. And whatever caregivers, whatever parents, whatever guardians would like to be a part of the session are able to be a part of the session. And massive bonus, this child that we're working with understands on a much deeper level, I am seen, I am heard, I am important, and I matter. And it is a huge, huge, huge thing that is so important for them to really deeply understand. And it's not that we're necessarily saying it verbally, but it's such a deeper understanding that gets wired in, and it is so important.
Totally. And I feel like something as intimate as speech, it's just like any other really like choice or preference or like, I don't know, lifestyle. Like it's such an intimate thing. And I think that, our vibration and what we carry and how we exude, it's like we all have like a really unique blueprint through our voice.
Mm-hmm.
When that comes through with speech, it's kind of like our voice turns on like when we're ready. It's not like we can command it to be ready. It's exactly how you were saying, like allowing kids to just be in the comfort of their
Mm-hmm.
own space, knowing
Mm-hmm.
that they have that agency and that they can decide
Yeah.
in a sense, like decide, but
Yeah.
like feel comfortable enough to relax, to
Mm-hmm.
allow.
Yeah. I love that you said that they get to decide, because we can really encourage children. That's what we're doing. We're encouraging children to speak, but we cannot force them and we cannot pull that information out of them. So it really is a decision and a choice that they're working to the best of their ability. So we work with children, whether it's on speech, such as articulation, voice, fluency, that's a speech component, or a language component, which is two parts: our ability to understand language and our ability to express language. Children are working to communicate, and whether they are beautifully verbal and that they have these incredible speech and language skills, or if they are having difficulty, they're doing the best that they can. And it is up to us to continue to support them and encourage and cue that clear production of their language and communication, however it appears, whether it is appearing through coos and babbles, or attempts, or melodies such as that's a melodic carrying, and that is them communicating. And it's really about them helping to communicate to the best of their ability, their individual blueprint ability.
Yeah. And communicating to get their voice across, to get their point across, not necessarily communicating to get a response. Whereas I feel like with parents communicate to get the response more so than to get their voice across. Whereas kids communicate to get their voice across. They want to share what they need and what they want. And they're very clear about that. Whereas I feel like when we grow up and become conditioned, we have to untangle that a bit. Like, what do I want? Like, what is important, And I feel
Very
like
much so.
kids, they just know, they're in touch. And like I feel like for parents and I feel like that's probably the biggest stress, is for parents to like anticipate what kids want and need, and if it's not coming through in that similar value of being verbal, it's almost like having one of your senses taken away, right? Like if you're blindfolded, that means like all of your other senses tune in even more just to sort of compensate. So I feel like even when, kids are nonverbal, like I would even argue that their communication is stronger, only because like I really believe like kids and animals teach us so much about communication because they're so clear and because it's so potent, like I think about my dog and she's very communicative. Her eyes can just pierce through your whole soul, and
Mhm.
whether it's her whining or her play or her body language, like there are so many ways that
Yeah.
I can tell exactly what she's asking for, needing, it's just like if we can give ourselves the spaciousness to know that like maybe we can also develop our own senses, because sensory is so important to receive feedback through as well. And like how that may teach us or make us more clear, or give us a little insight that kind of cuts through. Whereas sometimes language, like as you said earlier, language has the ability to sugarcoat at times, or you know I think communication is so multifaceted.
Completely. There's multiple layers. So what we do is, as we're articulating, and we are technically verbally communicating at this point, but also when we communicate, there are a variety of studies and the percentage varies, but typically you'll hear 70% of our communication is non-verbal. So quite literally, it's not coming out our mouth. It's being communicated through our gestures, through our eyes, through the tone, not necessarily the word, but the tone of voice that we're using. Also, with how we're conveying, whether we're in a loving area or in a less than positive area.
Mm.
all of these other things are coming into play. We communicate with colors and with our clothing. So many, so many, so many different layers. And I love that you pointed out with your dog, because animals are amazing communicators and they actually are picking up on a ton of other information that we consciously in our everyday conversation may not be necessarily engaged in. But our animals and little ones and just so many plants around us, there's everything is energy and everything is communicating. Which way are we communicating? Which one are you tuned in, tapped in, and turned on to?
Totally. Oh, I love it because it's endless and it's all so unique to each individual.
Mm-hmm. That is
Totally.
so beautifully said.
I would love to hear too about how teletherapy has been going because I know it doesn't work for all areas. Like for example, with me with play therapy, it's more ideal to be in person because there are younger ages involved. And yeah, I would love to hear how, because I know you mentioned it provides the comfort of your own home and you get to be have a lot of that permission. I would love to hear how
That's a
that
great question.
goes with speech.
Yeah, that's a great question. So with online therapy, especially with BetterSpeech, we have been online since long before the pandemic. So before it was trending, we have actually been growing and growing ever since. Right now, we are over 150 speech language pathologists wide, and we're able to provide speech therapy services throughout the entire US. And we are also internationally offering services, which is an amazing thing to bring skill and to bring care and to bring incredible incredible ways to communicate to people in today's world, especially in so many areas. So, for example, people who are really rural, they might not have the ability to go to a clinic and it might be 45 minutes away. Or in my case, there is an outpatient clinic, but right now there's a 6-month wait list just to get the evaluation, not specifically to get treatment. It's just the evaluation. And then there's another wait list for treatment. So, with the environment that we provide, our intention is to always provide effective, affordable, and convenient online speech therapy services. And there are so many people that really do benefit because you're not taking them necessarily out of their most familiar environment. Even if you say at the end of a long school day, you're now popping in the car and you're driving to a clinic into an environment that your child doesn't really know about, and you're really causing a lot of disruption to them. And so it doesn't work necessarily for them. But the fact that they're home and they're with familiar people, what we do a lot of is we use technology to our advantage. We use it for positive impact. And that's a great thing. We can actually share the screen. We can give control to our little one and have them engage in games with online therapy. So we're just as effective and we're able to engage with them using our technology. They're also able to play so that they understand that this is a really great thing. And as we're doing that, we're also able to talk with the parents. So and as you well know, with play-based therapy, you're there for a short amount of time, which is great that you're there. But our responsibility is to also teach what we know so that they can apply it in their everyday life, so that we make it really, really functional for them. A lot of the time people will think, speech therapy, I need to sit down and I need to focus. And we're absolutely not. It's not necessarily where you need to sit down every single day and work on this specific skill. We make it really functional. So that way you're using it naturally, automatically, and easily in your everyday communication. So when you're going into the car, you get time to actually talk back and forth and build your skills. Or if you're having bath time, that is also great times to build those language skills and whatever goals that you're working on. Or if you're playing with toys and doing Legos, or if it's during dinner and you're preparing food and your little one is actually playing on the floor with their toy. There's ways to make it so functional. And that is a great, great thing about online therapy. We are in that environment. So we could say, okay, show me what your kids' toys look like so I know what you're working with and how can I help? Versus if I'm in the clinic and I don't know what you have in your home, I'm now introducing new toys that they have no correlation with, and it's much harder to make it more functional for them. The goal is you are at home and this is how we can make it functional for you.
Totally. That's amazing. So cool.
There's also with our platform, what we provide is tons of games. So when when you're working with BetterSpeech, you actually get to log into your account, you get to see your progress, you get to see your goals, and you also get to play games. And that's another great way that we integrate that functional component. So that way, when you go on and you go to work on speech therapy, there's something easy, effective, and already in place for you to do. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have these things in place. So we're really, really proud of that platform and being able to offer more functionality for these families and these children.
So powerful. And how can parents like tell, or I guess if parents are curious, like, oh, would my child be a good fit for speech therapy? Like what would be some of the um, treatments, or I guess like what would be some of the um, diagnoses, like how would parents know to collect this support um, and be able to show up?
That's a great question. So right now on our social media platforms with Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, we offer a lot of content of what is normal development and what do delays look like, because people don't always know, but also that development is huge and people develop at their own pace, which you mentioned earlier. And I love that. So they're developing at their own pace. And what exactly does a delay look like? If you notice that your child is having difficulty following commands, or if they're having difficulty identifying things, that can be an indicator of receptive language difficulties, where the information's going in, but they're really having trouble understanding it, processing it, and actually executing on that. So, for example, if you say to your 2-year-old, wear your shoes, and they don't know what their shoes look like, or they can't identify them, that's a little bit of a concern. When it comes to expressive language development, good rules of thumb are your 1-year-old will say 1 word, 2-year-olds, they're building to 2 words, 3-year-olds, they got 3-word combinations. So if you have concerns, is my little one communicating enough? I'm not too sure. Or what should it look like? With BetterSpeech, you can actually reach out to us at betterspeech.com, and we offer a free 15-minute consultation where you can actually talk to a human. You get to talk to a speech language pathologist, and we're able to guide you and offer you more information from there. And we are so, so proud of that. I don't know if anybody else has rolled over at 2 a.m. with questions and thinking, I have to wait 6 months to talk to a professional about my questions. That's a really long time. We're so happy to be able to offer this free 15-minute consultation so that you can talk to a professional and you can get the guidance that you want and that you may need at that point in time.
So cool. Yeah. And I would just, encourage parents to lean into that if they have any questions or concerns, because I'm sure they come away with it with a little golden nugget of what they've learned. Like I'm sure there's something to even take away.
Absolutely. And we're able to provide a full evaluation. We're able to provide those therapy services. So if there is a concern, you can immediately get treatment. And sometimes, and not sometimes, excuse me, more often than not, we're matching people up the very next day. Sometimes
Mm.
there is like a 2 or 3 day delay with scheduling, but we can match you so quickly and easily. So I am licensed by the American Speech Language Hearing Association, but that is my board certification, and I am licensed in the states that I am licensed in. So right now I live in 1 state, but I'm licensed in 5, which means I get to work with families in Colorado. I get to work with people in Florida. And that is an incredible, incredible thing, because if I had only been in 1 place or licensed only in 1 state, I wouldn't have the ability to provide care and service to so many people. And the speech language pathologists that we have on our team, some are licensed in 10 states. That's incredible. So they're able to really bring their skills to so many people that are needing speech therapy services and that are wanting speech therapy services.
Totally. Well, is there anything else that you would like to share today? I feel like that was really powerful, and I'm so glad to have learned all of those things.
Thank you so much for having me. If you guys have questions, feel free to reach out to us at betterspeech.com. Follow us on social media. I'm sure the links will all be in the show notes and stuff. If you have questions, reach out to us. You're welcome to leave comments and ask questions on social media, or you're welcome to contact us directly. And thank you so much for allowing me to be here, Jennifer. It was great talking with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. And if you have any questions about how to get started, we'll have that in the show notes as well. And Lenora, thank you so much for coming. This was a pleasure.
Yes, very much so.
Take care, everybody. Bye.